We're back for another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras with myself, Farah Williams, and the amazing Anita Asante. Neat, we loved it so much last week in studio. We thought we'd give it another visit today to talk about the weekend's football. So before we go into that, we always like to hear what we've been getting up to during the week. Anything exciting you got up to during the week?
Well, I was at the North London Derby, so on Saturday. So I saw you there, obviously doing your thing, looking good from the sidelines.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Me and my glad rags and my casuals up in the gantry, freezing, cold.
Yeah, it was cold, wasn't
it? But no, it was brilliant. I mean, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I think, is super impressive. So it's nice to be there, even though I'm not a Tottenham fan per se.
Get that out there.
Yeah, just gotta get that out there.
Come at you and dagger you.
But no, it was really good to be there and be a bit on radio. How about you? How was it from the pitch side?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, as you mentioned, really nice stadium. Nice that there were games played at the men's stadium, and we'll go into detail in that. But you know what I did during the week? I actually went for a 360, basically full body MOT with Nuffield Health.
Wow.
Yeah. So you kind of get all your kind of movement stuff. You do all your bloods, smear tests for women, obviously like something that we probably don't go and do often enough. Results there and then on a day. I mean, the most surprising niche, you know what it's like when you retire, where you put a little bit of weight on, right? My body fat and BMI and all the body counts were actually in check. So I come out of there, I didn't even care about the blood results and everything. I was like, so long as I was in the green, yeah, I was happy with that. But no, I mean, really good, as I said, results like on the day. So something that I wanted to get done, something that, when you retire and you've kind of got that private healthcare, you don't tend to do it after, or I haven't bothered to kind of check in on my health. So yeah, really good to kind of do that. I was scared going, but I got it done. So it was really good on the day results, apart from obviously the smear that a week to come back. But yeah, really good, and would definitely recommend it. Yeah, it was cool. It was, get onto Nuffield Health. Yeah?
I need to. I think
360.
Most retired players don't even know their GP's number.
So. Exactly, that's the point. So I was I was buzzing that I was able to get that done. In a week, and kind of like, that little bit of like, okay, I'm okay, because you can you get a little sick, and you've got, as you say, we don't even contact our GP.
No.
The fact that I kind of got everything
just to know where you're at, isn't it?
Yeah, felt good too. Apart from I still can't touch my toes, and they were like, okay, you need to work on
flexibility.
Need to maybe do a bit of yoga. I was like, okay. I said yes, but it's not going to happen. But let's move away from my 360 MOT, and let's talk about, in my opinion, game of the weekend. And it was a top of the title clash between Chelsea and Manchester City. The game was played at Stamford Bridge, so obviously, yes, a home stadium, but really no home advantage, obviously, because they don't play there regularly enough. They come out on top, 2-0 winners. Erin Cuthbert describes Ramirez's goal as sheer euphoria. I mean, big words. I had to check what the meaning behind that was before I said it. But what did you make of the game, and Ramirez in particular?
I thought it was a really good game, a top tactical game for both teams. I think Chelsea showed just how much they really were up for it and wanted to come out with the outcome. But I think for Man City, I've never seen them struggle in the way that they did in that game to play the normal way they like to play in terms of build and possession and their patience. And for me, obviously, I do think them not having Hemp available was problematic for them, because she's so critical for a lot of their attacking and a lot of their creation phase play alongside Shaw. But massive credit to Chelsea, because any team that's going to face them this season is going to be like, wow, like intimidation factor.
Yeah, for sure. No, I would agree. I mean, it was a game that I was, as I said, looking forward to. We know the dominance Manchester City have certainly in possession. And for me, it was about, what is Sonia Bompastor going to do with this Chelsea team? Obviously, we know they beat Arsenal earlier in the season, and everybody said it wasn't a real challenge given the kind of situation Arsenal were in. And this was a first real big test. Gone the season so far unbeaten, won every single game. No draws in that. And I was wondering what kind of game plan they would adopt. And let me tell you, from a neutral's perspective, I know people will talk about me being a Chelsea fan. Tactically, they were spot on. I mean, they've stopped two of Man City. You talk about Man City in possession and how they have key build players in Alex Greenwood and obviously Hasegawa in midfield. And the way they adopted their press in limiting those two players in possession to get them going was impressive. Hermano for Chelsea and Ramirez in particular, in terms of stopping Alex Greenwood and Hasegawa, was good. But then it was about everybody connecting. And I thought that was the one thing that was impressive. You know what it's like when you do a press. If you go in isolation, you can easily be pop run. But they really did limit them to playing in those central areas and through their key players. And that was something that I was impressive. And equally in those transitions, the quality then in the final third, which in my opinion was the difference. Man City had their chances. We know that with Bunny Shaw. But the difference was how clinical they were in that final third.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, because I think Chelsea, it was coordinated and the intensity of it. And they were there for the drop downs, the first, the second contacts, the second phase of play. And you were saying to me as well, just like the sheer numbers they attack with, you know, makes it really hard for Manchester City to get forward and try and break that press. And they're just so clinical at the moment, so ruthless. Like, I really enjoyed watching Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd as well as Guru Reiten, but they just seem like everything that they touch basically turns to gold. You know, like,
no, it's true.
You know, they just seem so hungry. And for Manchester City, you know, they struggled to build, but it was partly because Chelsea set up in a way that they were happy to allow Alana Kennedy to just stay on the ball, for example, and just, you know, be patient. And you'll probably go more into that, because you were saying to me just how frustrated you were with sort of what she was doing in possession. But they've sort of adopted what Emma Hayes was okay with, which was not having the ball and making the team comfortable with that. But it was more clear, I think, in terms of the roles and responsibilities of those players. Like you said, you know, Hermano dealing with Hasegawa, literally stopping the supply, and Guru trying to, you know, jump press the centre backs. For me, they did what Manchester City did to Barcelona.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you speak on it there about Emma Hayes and how well she had this Chelsea team suffer without possession. And they kind of got into that where they was okay to not dominate possession and win games, but not in a way where they were connected in terms of those transitions. I think Bompastor certainly, as you mentioned there, kind of given those roles and responsibilities individually. And you know what it's like as a player. When you have clarity, it makes everything on the pitch just that little bit easier.
Definitely.
And I felt like Chelsea had that. They were okay suffering without the ball. And then they had those clear identities or roles and responsibilities to then in possession press. But I think for Manchester City, and whether it was they highlighted Kennedy in possession was a weaker link in the team, that's absolutely fine. And Manchester City, if they'd have done their homework, would have probably known that, right? So they would have probably known that they would have forced them to that side, because teams do that. Force it to Alana Kennedy on the right-hand side and let's see what she can do. The problem was for me is that she stood on the ball for too long. Okay. Now, to break a press, if you're setting up a press, you're not just going to jump out to a centre half and leave your player spare, right? So what you can do if you're stood on the ball, in my opinion, what she could have done was maybe drove with the ball or travelled with the ball into the press, because then that breaks the press a little bit. Somebody then has to come and make contact with her. They didn't. So she never ever stepped into play. I mean, in possession, I felt she was shaky, even under no pressure. And then I think because they took out Hasegawa centrally, they didn't recognise where the spare player was. And it was their second number 10. So Jill Rodd on one side, the left-hand side of the two that they play in front of their pivot, was a spare player throughout the game. And as I said, because they're so used to maybe going through Hasegawa and then to Jill Rodd, they just neglected it. And it was a definite out for them. And maybe one, Alana Kennedy maybe didn't see it, or two, didn't have the capabilities to play that type of pass. And I felt like they missed the trick there. Although Chelsea's press was great, they did leave options that they knew a player wasn't probably capable of recognising in the game.
And do you think that sometimes, you know, I know as a centre-back, sometimes when your team has made a couple of mistakes in the build and they can't quite find the rhythm and who they're trying to play into, that you stop taking the risks. So she didn't want to drive with the ball, trigger the press because she was afraid of turnovers. And obviously knowing the threat of Ramirez and Guru Reiten and Kaneryd, that she was just like, no, I'm not doing it, you know? Yeah,
no, potentially. But I also thought, I mean, they've got a striker in Bunny Shaw who, you know, even back to go on, I know they've got Millie Brighton beyond they had two good big centre halves. I would argue that Bunny Shaw can handle a ball into her where she can hold it up and then allow her tens to play off. So actually beat the press. Yeah. They didn't even consider, they did a couple of times, they went a bit longer, but they should have considered it a little bit more in the game. And that might have you talk about getting past the press, and most of the time, the only way we look past the press is by playing on the floor. Just lift it. Beat the press with the ball in the air. You've already got two holders in there, and Cuthbert and Nuskin, that actually wanted to jump press. Okay, let them do that, and we're going to lift it. They didn't use that enough, so they neglected that. But, I mean, I'm sure Manchester City will bounce back from this. It's a big loss, I think, because Chelsea don't look as if they're going to be beaten.
Yeah.
So I think going behind, and obviously we know Chelsea have got Man United in that game. Sorry, that one game that they had in hand, at the weekend. And then there'll be a 4-point gap, which doesn't seem a lot. But I think in our league and the competitiveness, I think it's a massive one. But that's Chelsea, Man City. But we have to talk about a couple of the individuals. We have to talk about Ramirez's goal. I mean, where do we start in terms of that physicality? The way that she, I mean, I don't know, absolutely bullied Alana Kennedy off the ball. And Alana Kennedy's not soft, by the way. To then get a goal and obviously break through, and Alex Greenwood recovery run, and then the composure to finish. I mean, how impressive is Ramirez in this Chelsea team at the minute?
We have to break that down. Like, for me, I would be...
I'm glad you're breaking it down as a centre half. I would have probably been the one on the floor and I would have stayed down.
I would be like shook after that, because on her presence, her strength, her sheer strength as well, to just bully the centre back Alana Kennedy, get to the ball after the speed of which she was making that attack, to then find the composure to calm herself and slot the ball back into the back of net is sheer class. But obviously there was a number of errors from a Man City perspective that could have maybe nullified that. I think Alana Kennedy needed to be stronger. She has the presence. We know she's a tall, big, statured defender, and she didn't really use it. So I don't know if she was a bit intimidated by Ramirez, because she was putting herself about the whole game. And then, Alex Greenwood is a very good defender, as we know, and normally positionally she does really well. And she does a niche really well in the first phase to get across and try to cover. But for me, she has to show her wider of the goal and just offer her the near post. Yeah. Like, you can take that shot in near post, goalkeeper can cover that, and maybe she can cover the far side of the goal, or potentially get a block to the shot. But the minute you allow a centre forward of that quality to cut inside the full frame of the goal and take a shot, you're dead.
Yeah, it's true.
Literally,
it's true.
You're dead,
Yeah, it's true.
So for me, I mean, that's the errors on their part, but we can't take away from just the quality of Ramirez, and I'm glad I'm retired.
Me too. I mean, look, if you don't know about Ramirez, I mean, it'd be good to kind of watch Chelsea. Somebody that I believe at the minute is going under the radar a little bit, probably not hyped as much as she should be, and she's kind of finding that form, which is really good. You know what impressed me about her? I actually thought she was smart, and again, it might go back to the manager's roles and responsibility in terms of that clarity. Smart. Out of possession, she stopped Alex Greenwood getting on the ball, so their main threat from goalkeeper and to the back line. In possession, she went and sat herself on Alana Kennedy, so the opposite centre half, the right side centre half. Is that something she identified in game? Is it a role of responsibility? Did she feel like Kennedy was a weakness compared to Alex Greenwood? But most of the time, she tried to sit herself on the opposite centre half to Alex Greenwood, and kind of recognise that was maybe a vulnerability, a weaker link within the back line to get her success. But I just thought it was really smart from her in terms of what she did. But I mean, they ended up finishing 2-1. Guru Wrighton with a second goal again. Manchester City will be absolutely fuming with the defending. It was come from a corner, didn't clear the lines, kind of staggered out, didn't take responsibility to lock onto players and Guru Wrighton. But the question is, Needs, we can talk about this game all day, and we both did, the women's football show last night. But do you think this is the best Chelsea team we've ever seen? Or is it too early to say?
I think personally it's too early to say. We're still at the sort of the first half of the season. I think their stats suggest they're going in the right trajectory. They've scored like 16 open play goals, something like that, 5 from set pieces. Like, they are always exceeding their XG quite significantly. So, I mean, you potentially, definitely. But I think we're going to compare Sonia Bompastor to Emma Hayes in the time length that, Emma Hayes was in charge, then it wouldn't be fair to measure this really short window of time that she's been in charge to basically the legacy of Emma Hayes, where they've won multiple consecutive titles, have had some invincible seasons as well at this stage. But like I said, I definitely think they're going in the right direction for us to potentially be saying that in the future.
No, I mean, I would agree. I think, look, we have to add that Emma Hayes left and Bompastor inherited a very good and a very well-drilled Chelsea team. And she's kind of added her players into that mix, got rid of a few, added hers in. But they do and are looking like potentially, as you mentioned, you know, certainly if they go on and win that Champions League, which is something Emma Hayes wasn't able to do, it will definitely be spoken about maybe as one of the best Chelsea women's teams.
Can I just say, I think for me, I want to see the evolution of Chelsea being the team that actually dominates the ball more.
For sure.
To be that progression as well.
Yeah.
Because I think they're devastating in all other categories.
Yeah.
But can they be the team that like control the games more?
In possession.
In possession.
Good shout. So that takes me to ask you, who was the toughest team you faced in your career? Doesn't have to be WSL. It could be, but in league football, not international. So we're talking in any of the league, domestically, whichever team.
I think in the early days, Charlton.
Okay.
That, you know, that was a big rivalry. I think, you know, in the early phases, because we just used to end up in rucks.
Yeah. See,
on the pitch.
Was that because Arsenal was a possession-based team? You're talking when you was at Arsenal or Chelsea?
Oh, when I was at Arsenal, yeah.
So when you was at Arsenal, you come up against the Charlton team, because I know obviously when I played at Charlton, we were that kind of direct team, kind of fighters, players that were aggressive, wanting to kind of kick those better players, I guess, that we come up against. And certainly in those Charlton Arsenal games, that was pretty much the game plan. Can we kind of be direct, second ball game, and make the game ugly?
Yeah.
Is it those kind of tactics that you did enjoy?
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, soft girl life.
Soft girl, you're one of the hardest players in the league.
No, I think you just always knew that was going to be a tough game. And it was another London derby game. There was edgy players in your team, lots of character, lots of big leaders and personalities. You know, you had Pauline Cope, you had Katie Chapman, you had all these characters that you knew they were going to be up for it. They weren't going to let you get away without a bruise.
Yeah.
Like,
sure, that's true.
And actually it was good because it was always a good competitive game where we had to be at our best to get an outcome, if the outcome we wanted, you know? So I enjoyed those fixtures, but I would say in those days that was the toughest opposition. And then obviously when I got to Chelsea, I think Man City was always the toughest game for us. Yeah. And the rivalry felt quite strong, you know, and you know, it was kind of that kind of love-hate relationship because you know players and you're friends with them, but when it came to game day, it was like different. We're frenemies, you know? Yeah,
mine would be when I was at Everton and we played against Arsenal. I mean, and not for the same reasons, more for the reasons that they were so dominant, Arsenal, in possession with the ball. And not only that, they always most attacks turned to goals for them. They were so clinical. I mean, Julie Fleeting for one, it was, I mean, when you're a player that, you know, they fly you in on match day from Scotland just to turn up and play. You don't train all week with the team and you fly in and score a hat-trick. I mean, these are the type of players that I'm talking about we used to come up against, and it was like, oh my God, we got Arsenal again. They were like that. Them Arsenal teams back in the day, I mean, in terms of having everything, was always one of them where I'm like, oh, this is like, just hurry up, get the 90 minutes over and done with, because as much as we give everything, we're probably not going to get anything from the game. And they were always difficult to play against. But mate, good memories back in the day of playing. At least, you know what, at least back then, the games were different in terms of what we're saying was tough about it. I think nowadays when you watch the WSL, I mean, pretty much every team plays the same in terms of that possession-based football. So they probably don't...
I think a lot more fouls were committed.
Oh, back then? Yeah, and we didn't get them.
You know, it was like the ball and the player is not getting past me.
100%.
You know, and people willing to just die for the cause, literally. So I think from that level, it was they were good, competitive, but tough games.
Tough games, right. We have to go back to WSL and back to the Merseyside derby. Everton at home to Liverpool at Goodison Park. Again, not their normal home ground, but as we mentioned, the teams were playing over the men's stadiums at the weekend. But there was a huge decision in that game that went against Liverpool and for Everton, and it was a penalty decision that Abigail Byrne pointed straight to the spot after Nagano's tackle on Everton's player. What was your take on that? And was it a spoiler? We heard Matt Beard say after the game that it can't be happening.
Honestly, my first reaction was like, what have I just witnessed? Like, really? What are we like watching? This is not grassroots football. Like that, honestly, because it's such a big decision. And as we know in the WSL, the margins, you know, between success and failure, relegation, winning a title are so small. Every single decision matters, especially when you're sitting at the bottom of the table. And I've been into teams like that, obviously at Villa, where those games you're literally scrapping, you're fighting for every decision, and for the referee to just instantly point to something, you know, without hesitation.
There was no hesitation. That was the surprising thing.
She had, in my opinion, the perfect view to see it. Is just shocking. So I totally understand Matt Beard's reaction. You know, because it's just like it's a derby as well. Like for Liverpool, now they don't have bragging rights.
They definitely don't. Yeah, I mean, I think the most shocking thing, and Matt Beard did say it in his interview, is the fact that none of the eye lines of whether it be the fourth official, whether it be the lines person, whether it be, or the assistant referee, they call him, don't they? Whether it be the referee, they had a clear view of the challenge. So to get it so wrong and to be so adamant and so quick to point to the spot, I think that was the thing that I was a bit taken back from. I think there was no hesitation in the referee pointing to the spot for the penalty. But I do think it was a game changer. And I think Matt Beard's frustration also was that he felt, though, in the game after that penalty, that Liverpool potentially should have had another couple of penalties. And I know we always talk about, you know, referees try and make up for their mistakes. On this occasion, Abigail was having none of it, and she didn't deem them to be penalties. I don't know if you saw the Olivia Smith and I think it was Holland, Kerry Holland's penalty shouts. What's your thoughts on them?
I think when you look at Kerry Holland in particular, but as well Olivia Smith, those almost look more clear-cut than the one she gave, because they're directly in the box by quite a lot. Of distance. And Kerry Holland, for sure, that one to me looked like a penalty.
I think that Kerry Holland one, I don't know if you agree, anywhere else on the pitch, it's a foul.
Yeah, definitely.
I know she was going away from goal and her touch took her away from goal, but she's been not completely off the ball, brought down in the box.
Brought down.
It's a penalty, right?
And she's a quick player, actually. Yeah. So, her touch maybe veered slightly away from her, but she might have got to it if her momentum isn't stopped. For me, that one is probably more clear-cut. You know, the Smith one, you could argue, you know, I think the defender tries to get a foot out the way. So
she dangles a leg.
She dangles it in.
Smith kind of makes the contact, doesn't she?
So you could probably forgive the referees or the officials for that decision. But the Kerry Holland one, compared to the Nagano situation, I think 100%, you know, that's a penalty. But here we are.
So saying that, we know VAR is not in the game. For the foreseeable. At the minute, it's not in conversation, I don't think, in terms of the cost and how effective it will be. So what do you think the solution could be in the short term until maybe that does come into place within the women's game? Like, what can we do better in order for these, you know, mistakes not to happen?
Well, I just wonder if there's an option for a cheaper version.
Do you know what I was thinking when you say cheaper version? Is that we know now that most teams have in their dugout the monitors. They have the screen, don't they?
Replay.
Yeah. So they have they have monitors in front of them. Is there an option for the fourth official to see that, or to have their own monitor to kind of, because they obviously have the communication, don't they? So you're talking about a cheaper version. Is there an option for the fourth official who could have a monitor in front of them if we don't want to use VAR and go down that route?
I think why not consider it? It's a cheaper option. It's an opportunity to replay and see an action again, and to make better calls on those situations or scenarios. And you know, as a coach or as an analyst, we have access to those things. We use them to see things happening live in the game, so that we can affect the game for our players and our teams. So I don't see why we shouldn't consider an option like that to support and help the officials as well, and take a bit more pressure off them. But I think where the women's game is at the moment, we know VAR is an expensive operation to run, and not all the women's teams are playing at the main stadiums consistently across the season. So, you know, we need to look at, we're saying we want to keep leveling up the game. We have to look at that going into the future.
No, I mean, I think that'll be a great option. As you say, it doesn't take much for a monitor to just be in front of the fourth official and, kind of have that replay and make a decision on that. I just think it won't make decisions like we saw yesterday in the Merseyside derby
But goal line technology,
and we need help. Yeah, I mean,
let's get that first, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate. I would love goal line technology. That's something that I would have just kept in the men's game. Goal line technology. I'm not an advocate for VAR. I think human error is fine. I think in them occasions where they're so obvious in terms of that penalty, it's quite difficult.
Sure.
But as I say, you could just have that monitor where you go, actually, it was outside the box. Look, made the wrong call. Give the free kick and we go from there.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
yeah, I mean, that's something that I guess is it the PGMOL? MOL, yeah, that's right. Need to maybe consider. I'm not saying to scrutinise the referee in her decision. It's what she felt she's seen.
Yeah.
And probably need support with that. And when you don't have that support, you can make decisions and get them wrong. But let's talk about the WSL. Every game across WSL 1 and Championship were played at the men's stadium this weekend for the first time ever in the women's game. Now, do you think this can happen every week? Do you think it's a sustainable thing that can happen capacity-wise in terms of, filling out stadiums, cost-effective, all of these things? Do you think it's a good thing that we do that? Do you think it needs to be one-off? Do you think there need to be, stadiums maybe built for men's 23 / women's section? Because you think of, I mean, if you look across the games in the women's games at the weekend, I don't think there was a sellout stadium.
No, there wasn't.
So are we at that stage where we are ready to play in a men's stadium, given the fact we can't sell out a stadium even during International Week for the men's game?
Yeah, I look at that as not good and bad. Mm-hmm. I look at things that are positive from that and the things that maybe we need to look and address. So it was a positive thing in the fact that we've managed to get 2 tiers of the top level of the women's game to want to do it.
Yep.
The clubs want to do it across the Championship and in the WSL, and for the fan bases as well, for supporters, because it's supporters, it's their club, regardless of the men or the women's game, they're supporters of the club. So they have the opportunity to go and watch their teams play. That's fantastic. I think in terms of the differences across the league, okay, so like Arsenal, we know have had really good attendance, have been leading the way in terms of attendances. They're just in a different phase of the club's progression compared to the rest of the teams in the league. So should all the clubs be doing exactly the same thing at this moment in time? Maybe not. That for me is where we need to look at it, where they maybe have to be trying to just get to a decent level, medium-sized stadium that they can progressively try to fill. But it's also, what's the payoff? Like the costs, the cost element to the clubs, because
policing, stewarding, ambulance, all of that.
Exactly, and staffing those games and all of that, the transportation, all of that is now the next big issue, and therefore, and also the clashes that we're seeing with the Arsenal Women's Champions League game, with the men's Carabao Cup game. That it was unprecedented. No one really anticipated something like that happening, but now it's happening. So now we have to look forward and to the future and sort of be more proactive. So those things don't happen. But I don't know. Like, what's your perspective?
I don't know. I think I'm along the same lines as you. I think it's great. I think if you look at the positives from it, I mean, it's never happened. So every team, WSL and Championship, to have the opportunity to play at the men's stadium, it's kind of, it's great. It's something that players dream of, certainly in the women's game and certainly in that Championship. Who would have thought the Championship, like you look at Newcastle, for example, who would have thought Newcastle women would be going to St James's Park and kind of playing their games there. So I think it's great for that reason. I think it's difficult because, as you mentioned, in terms of the growth of the club and where they're at, I think every club within the women's game is at different levels in terms of fan base. Arsenal have been dominating for many years now, and their fan base is great. We know that they can fill out back-to-back Emirates games. We saw that last season. But then you look at the likes of Tottenham, who are just down the road from them, and we saw that game at the weekend, the North London derby. Now, Arsenal had 3,000 tickets given to their away fans from Tottenham, and they sold them out. If you'd have given Arsenal fans 10,000 tickets for the away section, I believe they would have sold them out. Now, they won't have wanted that as a home game. So as a home fixture of Tottenham, they aren't going to want it to be 50-50 in terms of fans. They don't want to give them an advantage. And so for that reason, it's difficult. We still see Chelsea unable to sell out Stamford Bridge. We saw that Manchester City don't sell out the Etihad. I'm getting Emirates Etihad. The Etihad Stadium. So, and these are our 3 top teams. At the minute, Arsenal were leading the way in terms of their fan base and being able to fill it. But then you go back to costs. You talk about how much do we sell tickets for? How much does it cost to get all the shoeing in and X, Y, and Z in? We're not quite there in terms of kind of balancing that out. My thought is that, I mean, I know
Is it sustainable?
I don't think so yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so yet. And I don't know if we can get to that place. But then there's always been promise, and you've heard it. I remember when Arsenal were in a much better position, so it's probably not the right team to talk on. But when I was signing for Arsenal, one of their selling points was they were having their own stadium built. That was, they bought the iPad to me. They had the stadium, and that was what that's what they were showing me. The club are backing the women. They're having their own stadium, 20,000 seater, blah, 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 etc. Hasn't yet happened. Yes, they have Bournemouth that they share with the 23s. Now they play at the Emirates and they're selling that out on different occasions. But what they sold to you and what's actually happening, and that was in 2015.
Wow.
So we're nearly 10 years on from that. Yeah. And there hasn't been any progress in terms of their own stadium. We know that Manchester City have that with their 23s. And I think that's a great size stadium for where the women's game's at. Is that a model that other teams look at? And maybe try and build fan base to fill those stadiums before we jump from, I don't know, a couple of 1,000-seater stadium to an 80,000-seater stadium, potentially.
Yeah.
I don't think the fan bases of the women's game is quite there to fill out the men's stadium on a weekly basis. That's just my opinion. I mean, the fact that we're inviting Arsenal Tottenham fans from the North London derby to get on a tube across the Stamford Bridge to watch a Chelsea against Manchester City game tells you or suggests to you that actually these clubs individually don't quite have a fan base big enough to fill the stadiums. And at the minute, women's football is just kind of widely supported by everybody.
Yeah.
And that's how we fill stadiums.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Brighton are one of the clubs that want to have a medium-sized stadium for their women's team. So they're looking towards that. And I think Aston Villa, when I first signed with them, that was their long-term goal to take over, I think, one of the Olympic stadiums or something like that. So, that's a future goal for them. Obviously, at my time at Bristol City, they playing out of Ashton Gate, and they got the 5th highest attendance across Europe for a women's game. Yeah. So it's positive. Yeah. But in terms of sustainability, I think that's where, it's going to be difficult. And we're just talking on a kind of football economy level. But even for players, I was thinking about this. How do you think it feels for players from a psychological perspective to not be consistently playing at a ground that is their home ground? Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I always found difficult. I remember it was with Rio Ferdinand, we had a conversation actually before the women's Euros, home Euros. And we were talking, and there was some debate, argument that the stadiums that we were using for the tournament weren't big enough. So some of the other nations weren't happy that we were having smaller stadiums, 9,000-seater stadiums, as opposed to a Wembley or whatever that we were using that were 80,000+ seaters. And I'd said to Rio, and Rio said he would rather play in the big stadiums. And I went back to him and I said to him, but Rio, have you ever walked out at Old Trafford in a half-full stadium? And his answer to me was no. I said, well, you'll never know how that feels as a player to walk out in a massive stadium, beautiful stadium, and have no atmosphere, and have a half or even quarter-full stadium. You don't even feel like you're playing on a park, a field. Yeah. It feels like a big open space. It doesn't feel like it's compact and it's, you got the kind of fans like on your arena. So yeah, it doesn't feel like that. And so then he kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that. So it's great that we have these big stadiums that look unbelievable. And obviously the turf, like you don't get to play on turf like that every week. But at the same time, as a player, I'm going half empty stadium. Sometimes that can feel like a training game. Yeah. It doesn't, whereas you go to Kings Meadow, for example, or Boreham Wood, and the fans are pretty much on top of you. Close. You can hear the noise. Although it's only 4,500, it just feels a lot louder. It feels more real. So yeah, that psychologically, that's where I'm at in terms of kind of these stadiums are probably right now too big for the women's games in terms of selling them out and making it really feel like a game. I think it also changes how teams play a little bit. Oh yeah, for sure. Obviously if you're playing at an Emirates or an Etihad, and some of these pitches are, bigger. They're bigger than Meadow Park or Kings Meadow or whatever. So, if you're that possession-based team that wants to dominate the ball, you probably want it to feel a bit more compact so you can be closer to your teammates in those triangles, and suddenly you get into a more expansive pitch. Or you're like me when I played at Villa and you're playing Man City and they're stretching you all over the park, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is hellish, you know? So I think there's like, you know, disadvantages as well, and advantages for certain teams by playing in the main stadium or just their regular grounds.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. What happened to me at Reading? Like, we played at Wickham Stadium.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know people are probably thinking Reading, they don't play with the ball, whatever. We actually did. We had a really, really good in-possession coach, and we'd work on it through the week. And we played at Wickham, and we was actually good with the ball. I mean, surprised teams at time. As I mentioned, the name, probably people didn't expect it, but we were actually really good. And the following season, we moved to the Majeski Stadium, so the men's stadium. And honest to God, the pitch felt double the size. And it probably wasn't. There was probably small margins between the sizes of the pitch. I think the fact that the stadium was so big, I think the fact that it was so open, our small capacity of 1,500 to 2,000 fans that used to come to Wickham, that kind of gave it a little bit of atmosphere, that then come across to the Majeski. When you walked out of the Majeski, honestly, it's 3.5 of the stand, 3.5 sides of the stand were empty. And we had our small minority of fans. So it never ever felt like we had an advantage in terms of fans, in terms of playing on the pitch. And as you mentioned before, talking about pitch size, the pitch then became too big. So our in possession became even harder. And you know what it's like when you're in possession in set positions. When you lose it and it ain't executed, the gaps then defensively in those transitions are massive. And mate, you know I didn't like running. So those transitions, I felt like I was treading water. But that's all I can kind of, when I talk about my experiences of playing at different stadiums, I feel like the minute there's really no advantage in playing at the men's stadiums in terms of fan base, etc., and pitch sizes. You're not kind of used to training and playing at them size pitches. But I think it's something that they're definitely considering. It's something that in the future, I'm sure, whether it be at the men's stadium or these women's having their own kind of joint stadiums with 20 under 23 men's, I think would be a good option. But Nate, I don't know if you heard or read in the week, Lucy Bronze made a comment, 99% of female players couldn't retire on their salaries. And she said probably 99% of women players, you have to think about life after football. Lucy comments come after obviously Steph Houghton saying she received an annual salary of just $4,000 through bonuses and part-time coaching stint when she was an ambassador role, and she was on $9,000 for her club team. I mean, I think she's right in what she said. I think we all, well, maybe a little bit different now, but I even think with the way that the salaries are changing in the women's game, I still don't think they're on enough to retire and kind of be okay and set up for life. So I agree with those comments. They don't come as a surprise. No. I feel like they're in a better position financially to kind of start that saving process, start to be thinking about other things. Yeah. You know, in the cost of women's game, there's always kind of been that conversation about dual career. Can you find yourself whilst, can you maybe start going into college and kind of doing that dual career whilst playing? Sure. Obviously, as a professional, I'm assuming now the opportunity for that is a little bit less. Yeah. So it's a little bit more difficult. What's your thought on that before I even ask us about our first pay slip?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, we can all attest to those comments, 100% relate and be like, yeah, of course we can't. But at the same time, it's almost a question of, well, you know, should male footballers be able to retire on the salaries they're on? Yeah. I mean, if you flip the discussion, most people aren't able to retire in life, in the workforce, until much later in their lives. When, you know, they're in that retirement age, late 60s, early 70s. So, you know, if you put it in that context, then, well, no one really in sport on that level should be earning these like incredible, crazy sums of money to be able to retire. But we should be better remunerated, and the gender pay gap should get smaller for women and you know, to meet where men's salaries are, whether that be in the sport industry or other industries in general. We know that's a thing, that's a problem that affects other things. So like wanting to have a family or kids and all of that. So I think that's where we need parity, but we also don't have parity across the league. So there are very more better paid players at certain clubs compared to other clubs in the same league, and they're competing against each other. So there's a question mark over that. How do we bridge that gap? There's better paid players in your dressing room. Yeah. Can I just
interrupt on that? So do you think that it should be more of a priority to close the gap between, say, the bottom teams in the WSL to the top teams in the WSL over closing the gap from, say, the top women's teams to men's football? What do you think a priority should be in the short term? Certainly in the short term.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. And I think having parity in the league should be the priority, because that's how you make the most competitive league. Yeah. You make it better. The players are better remunerated. Their motivation levels are going to be higher. I know we say, people don't want to just motivated by money, but money motivates a lot of people in life, because everyone has bills to pay. Yeah. Everyone has things they want to do with the future as well. And it also helps that transition part. Yeah. When you have some financial security, maybe you can start to do other things you want to do, whether that's philanthropic things, investment things, whatever, which women tend to not be able to think about and do because we're not as well remunerated. But I think it would just bridge that gap. Yeah. It will bridge that gap within dressing rooms as well, potentially, if we start to consider, there are quite higher earners in one dressing room compared to another, youngsters coming into the team. And sometimes we don't think about how that affects young players coming in a team that are trying to match the lifestyle or whatever of the more senior players or other better paid players. So that would be a priority. But of course, we want to start bridging that gap towards the men's game for to be more sustainable and realistic as well with that.
No, I mean, I would agree. I certainly think that the pay from, say, the lower teams within our game is nowhere near where it should be. I mean, it's not a salary that is, even okay to live on, in terms of, you're talking about wanting the bare basics of being professional outside of being at the club, in terms of being able to have the right resources or finances to resource recovery, for example, or to food, for example, and all living conditions, travel, equipment. So all of those things, there's clubs that aren't there. My opinion, they kind of need to get that bridge gapped a little bit quicker, rather than the women to the men, because I think we're way off where the men are at in terms of the 200,000 a week. So I think our priority should be, how can we make it more professional, more competitive within our league, and to be on a salary that is, suitable. A very good salary. They deserve to be paid very well. But I'm saying, I just think the gap is massive. I know when I was at Reading, and the salary I left Arsenal on to go to Reading in the same league, training the same amount of times and everything. I had to relocate. I had to think about living conditions. And I was getting my house paid for when I was at Arsenal. Yeah. You don't get that at Reading. No. So you're not only dropping a salary to go to a lower team within the league, you're also then having to find money out of the salary to then pay for accommodation and food and travel, etc. I was getting a free car at Arsenal. So there was things that are so different within the league. Yeah. And I was probably one of the better paid players at Reading at the time. But then, as you mentioned, kids that were coming through, we'd travel to away games. And you don't even consider it. You get off at a service station, and not for 1 minute do you consider. I mean, there was a few of the younger players that would stay on the coach. Yeah. And it took a few games for me to understand why they're staying on the coach and not getting off. Well, you can imagine. They didn't have they weren't getting paid. They couldn't afford to get off and buy things. Double prices, by the way, in a service station. Yeah. And I remember thinking, shit, I've never considered this. I've never considered that they probably do want something out of the services, but they probably don't have the money to, and don't want to embarrass themselves, or maybe even say that they haven't got the money to go and buy what everybody else, every senior player is doing, in buying food and sweets and whatever else they do in the services, drinks. And I remember there'd be times you just go in and we'd buy donuts or jellies and sweets and whatever, and just put them on the table. Yeah. Because you don't want to shame them in buying stuff for them, and them knowing that might be a thing. So you're right. There's a massive pay discrepancy between players in your own club, and then obviously top to bottom in the league. And
just going back, because I didn't even say, when I was first at Arsenal, I think my contract was £80 a game. £100
more than me. I was getting 50.
£100 if we won, and that was it.
That was an incentive though. That extra £20 a month.
That extra £20, I want to win.
That's why. That's why you lot were so good. You know what? It's funny that we say that, and I remember there was rumours that the rumour that we heard was Arsenal get £75 if they draw, £50 if they lose, £100 if they win. And I was like, no wonder they flipping win every game. That extra £25 like a game. And I remember there was, look, we hear rumours, don't we, within the game? And that was one that we'd heard. Right. And I was like, no wonder they win everything. No wonder they do. That little bit of drive for that extra £25 was big, right?
Of course, that was huge. And, you figure that where we've come from then to now, my goal was just like, I want to buy a car, so that I can drive myself, and my dad doesn't have to be taxi or they have to get the bus everywhere. So, that was a massive difference. And then I got to Chelsea the first time around when I played for them in 2008. and it was £200.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, buzzing.
Double the pay.
You know? So, but that's the reality of where the game was and where we want to go. But it's all about what are we going to prioritize? Like, there's some clubs that don't even have more than one physio.
Yeah.
Or more than one analyst, or the coach is doing everything.
Yeah.
Just trying to help the players perform at their best. So, you know, what is going to get the product on the pitch in the best place possible while supporting the players and whilst helping them to think about their futures.
And also, I mean, look, I guess agents or representatives, whatever they want to call themselves, I know agents, there's some that call themselves agents, some that like to be seen as representatives who do a little bit more and not just solely focused on the footballer. They're actually focused on the person outside of that. I think they can do a little bit in kind of helping set them up. You know, you talk about younger players wanting to kind of wear that name brand that their senior has or whatever. It's about managing that money in the right way.
Of course.
And not trying to fit into a lifestyle that everybody else is doing, because we know that's what society, you know, gives us now. And whether it be, you know, can you set up a savings, whether you can set up education around it, because we know come retirement, and not everybody can retire. And I mean, we were very fortunate. We kind of had that little bit of luck, I guess, or maybe, is it luck? Who knows? We have the qualities as well to kind of do the punditry and obviously the coaching opportunities that we had. But not everybody's going to get those opportunities as soon as they retire. There has to be other options, and they have to have something. They have to come out of the game with something that will help them then move forward after football, because there's so many more years after football. I think we both know that. We tried to stay in the game as long as we could. I mean, I stayed till I was 37, and you try and stay in it long as you can, because we knew probably, I mean, I'm speaking on for me. You come out of the game, you come into the game with a degree. So you kind of had a degree kind of to fall back on. You were educated coming out of it. I wasn't, but you know, I left college in my first year because I just wanted to be a footballer. But realistically, I left college and in terms of didn't use that as a focus, got part-time jobs to pay for my training and traveling, etc. And you know, my first pay was probably at 25, and it was £50 a game.
But so, you had other jobs though, which kind of prepares you for life,
prepare you for
the real world a little
now
bit.
Now they don't work alongside,
and now
so you're right.
You don't get these kind of players going into these like mentorships necessarily doing degrees or whatever. So are we preparing the future generations for just being prepared for real life? Real life, and the realities. And I think
even interviews needs. At least you're right. I mean, I didn't even consider. We worked alongside playing, right? So I had bakery jobs. I mean, I had coaching jobs. I can't even think of other things. I was stacking shelves in Safeway. So we had jobs. We had to go and interview for these jobs. I'm not even sure that these players are skilled, trained, have a CV, know how to go and interview in a job. All the confidence and all of these things. And are they thinking about what next? And I know whilst you're playing, it's the hardest thing to do is to think about what next. And I didn't think about it until really late. I just thought, I'm going to be a coach. I want to be a coach. I've kind of dual did that alongside playing. And that's what I thought I was going to fall into. But I think there needs to be far more support around it.
But you hit the nail on the head. Financial acumen, helping players get educated on just whatever the finances are that they have throughout their career. If you're lucky enough to have a 10-year plus career, how can you save money? How can you be prepared for the future? How can you reach certain targets or goals that you want in life beyond your playing career? Because so much of our identity is linked to our football. And you know, all of these players are much more than that post-playing.
For sure.
Just supporting them, I think, with that would be massive.
We have some fans' questions, Neat. Actually, some good ones. I'm saying some good ones. One good one. Just because I'm a celebrity, get me out of here fan.
Yeah. You're already
and
watching.
So I am watching. I've already been talking about it before we come on here. But one of them is, which former teammate would you like to see in I'm a Celeb? There's a few.
I know what you're going to say. That's why I'm laughing.
You know who I'm going to say.
I know exactly who you're going to say.
God, if you know who I'm going to say, don't say it. You can read me like a book, I bet. Okay. You can say it if you want.
I'll say Enia Luca.
Yeah, I think it has 100%.
to be right.
She would be great TV.
She couldn't even do an ice bath. Come on.
Do you know what? I think Annie going into the jungle would be absolutely brilliant TV. I would love to see her in there.
Honestly, it'd be so entertaining.
Could you imagine like a creepy crawling era or something?
We'd be voting every week.
Could you imagine having to sleep on a swing bed? What is it, the hammock bed thing? It's like she could. No, I mean, her hair getting wet. I mean, there's all kinds. I think Ellie would be great.
We're nominating you, Ellie.
I'm trying. Ellie, mate, get on. I mean, she works for ITV, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean,
Ellie,
saying ITV, you know,
maybe next year. But I actually think she'd be really good TV.
She'd be brilliant.
She would be so good, wouldn't she?
So good.
I'm trying to think who else who would be like. The thing is, there's some teammates that would go in there like Jill and be loved and would smash tasks and be like great in terms of going and winning it. But I think the opposite for Eddie, where it was like, she'd probably refuse to do a task. If anything, I would refuse to do tasks. And I could just imagine Eddie being, I don't know, could you imagine Eddie being thrown into a coffin with snake? I mean,
no, I can't. That's why I want to see it happen.
Eddie would be great. Yeah, that ain't happening for Eddie. So that's why I'd want her to go there, because I think she'd be one of them that she'll keep getting the votes to do the trials.
Oh, yeah.
She'll come back with no stars.
She'll be using all her lawyer, terms as well to get out of stuff, I reckon.
Mate, who else would be good? Eddie would be a great one.
She'd be brilliant.
Oh, mate, get onto ITV.
I feel like Katie Chapman or someone would just smash it.
Yeah, Katie would smash it.
She'd just want to do every task possible.
I think Katie Chapman would smash it. I'm trying to think who would be really fun. Rachel Yankee.
Rachel Yankee would be.
She'd be a little bit similar to Eddie. Not as high maintenance, but I don't think she'd want to be around all that.
She'd be like, get me out of
here. I'm trying to think who would be great.
Get me out. Yeah, I mean, we had loads of personalities in the team.
Yeah.
I was thinking of KB as well, because I just feel like
she'd love it.
She'd love it, but she's a character, isn't she? And she'd be like lifting people over her shoulder.
Oh, mate, she'd get on people's nerves a little bit. Swing you. She used to do that to me. I was little and she's like...
Everyone's struggling because they're not eating enough food. She'd be like super positive and trying to get everybody up, and they're just like, we're not in the mood.
Just eat the leaf. It's fine.
I feel like she'd be really good.
There's a few guys. So yeah, whoever sent that in, we don't have the
it's a great
name,
question.
But that was a really good question. And the other question was, do we think Chelsea could be the Invincibles this year? So go unbeaten, not just unbeaten, not draws, fully win every game in the
competition,
league. No, just in the WSL. Just win every WSL game. Could they win every WSL game? That's a great
You're putting
question.
me on the spot now.
You know what? It'd be great if they could. I think it'll be. I mean, look, it's never been done before. I think unbeaten, but maybe not won every game.
No,
I don't think a team's won every game in the WSL.
I don't know.
It'll be incredible. I'm not sure it would happen.
I don't think they can win every game.
Yeah.
In the WSL this season, I think they can go unbeaten.
Yeah.
But to win every game, they've got to go away to Man City.
Yeah.
Like those games, especially
because the home record that Manchester City have.
Yeah. Is really good, and obviously off the back of a loss away to them. There's more at stake in that. It would be incredible if they managed to do it, but
it would be.
I mean, I think it's going to be a tough task, especially because they're playing in every competition.
That's what I think. I think that every competition, they've got a good squad depth. I mean, they've got an injury to Buchanan, and obviously that's massive. I think she started the season really well, so we obviously wish her well in her recovery. And as I said, yet again, another ACL that we don't want in the women's game. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure they can go every game with a win. Maybe unbeaten is more realistic. But guys, that is it. Thanks for listening to BBB. Remember, subscribe and comment, like. We love to hear your feedback on our episodes. And write the comments in the link below. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back every week throughout the WSL season, so tell your mates and all get involved. If you've got a point you think we should discuss, or you want to put us on the spot with a question you want answering, comment down below on this episode or on our social media channels. Make sure you leave us a review and follow Boots, Balls and Bras to never miss an episode.